President Biden delivered his second State of the Union address, and I'm just going to go ahead and call it the "Let's finish the job" speech. In 72 minutes, he repeated that line uh, over and over about 8 times. The question is, what is it that needs to be finished? And is this the president that you feel like has got things done? And what else needs to be done? Joining me, I'm so excited, a good friend of mine, Ray Baker, amazing professor at Towson University, who was serving up information for students. But I want him to talk to us today about his reactions about this speech. What was he left with? So welcome on this AURN platform, Ray.
So happy to be here with AURN. Always been a listener, always been someone who's followed the work of the network, and I'm glad that you're here doing that work now.
Absolutely. Thank you. So I couldn't wait to ask you this question. First, what were your thoughts going in? What was your level of expectation with the State of the Union address? What did you want to hear?
I don't know if it's so much as what I wanted to hear as much as you alluded to what I expected to hear. What I expected to hear was that President Biden wants to and tried to echo the idea or notion that he is here to steady the ship. There is a yearning for an America of yesteryear. Ironically, that's also what President Trump was alluding to in his campaign. But President Biden, on the whole, wants to allude to an America of yesteryear, an America where he alluded to a story of an iron worker and how they were invited and going to be a part of a new manufacturing efforts that were going to look to take the United States deeper and further into the 21st century. We know that he went to Wisconsin immediately following the State of the Union. He was in Baltimore touting investment and infrastructure right before the State of the Union. So President Biden wanted to strike a tone, and I assumed that he was going to go in to strike a tone to build up an America that was not a part of any of the divides or the particular partisanship, not Democrat, Republican, left, right, or even black, white, but one that speaks to a class, almost a coastal elite liberalism, if you will, versus the rugged, rural, I would use the word hooliganism that we saw from some members of Congress in the ways that they responded to the president. I think he wanted to avoid that and speak to an America that he thought was looking to be neither of those two. What I would caution the president, and I'm inviting your listeners and audience to be aware of, is maybe that United States doesn't exactly exist anymore. And if we were being completely honest, maybe it never did.
Okay, so hold on to that because I want to come back to that one lastly when we talk about the response from Sarah Huckabee Sanders. He touted a stronger economy, lower unemployment rates. He touted, you scratching your head. What you like? Let me buzz the circle. He touted, 12 million jobs. He compared himself and he painted this picture. We can talk about his record when it comes to child tax credit, even the investment in HBCUs. Let's talk about it. Lower unemployment rate. And when we talk about the administration that he inherited, we cannot take off the table that we were in the middle of a pandemic. He didn't really hit foreign policy like I thought, but he went down this list. One of the biggest areas that I was expecting more from was on the issue of police reform, because we saw the family of Tyre Nichols there, the mother, Rovon Wells, and his stepfather was there. But also in that audience was the family of Mike Brown, the family of Trayvon Martin. There were many people who have lost children and family members to police violence. We know the CBC thought this was a great opportunity for the president to hone in on what can be done next. On the issue of police reform, were your expectations, if you had any, met when it comes to this? And I can even pull up some of the statements that he made about police reform.
I thought that his statements on police reform went as far as a politician such as President Joe Biden could go. And what I mean by that is not to impugn his name or to suggest that he has any nefarious goals or means, but he is someone who believes deeply in the existing fabric, the status quo of the United States. Written into that status quo, deeply embedded in that, is a strong anti-Black bias. The value of using anti-Black as a language is because when we see police officers who happen to be Black, like the ones in Memphis, and they commit such a violent act against another Black person, if we frame it around the language of white supremacy, some of us are often able to resist and say, well, look at these Black police officers. How can this be white supremacy? Because Black folks can engage in white supremacy by functioning as agents of anti-Blackness. And the essential makeup of policing in the United States is along the lines of race and class. So often people want to distinguish the two, but those are not distinguishable. So while Mr. Biden, President Biden, offered his best attempts at speaking into existence a model of policing that, one, we've never seen before in the history of the United States, and two, is antithetical to what the function of police are supposed to be in the United States. He wanted to speak into existence something that could be reformed, something that can be changed, that can be ameliorated with different degrees of training, with different degrees of sensitivity, awareness, with asking the folks who we call upon as police officers to no longer do some of the work they do. He even mentioned we ask them to be counselors, we ask them to be social workers and things of the sort. Well, if our collective local, state, and federal budgets we're not so invested in policing, and we're instead invested in the wholesale welfare of all of us, social workers would get paid what they deserve to be government employees for the betterment of our collective society. Licensed psychologists would get paid what they need and deserve in order to work on for the benefit of our collective society. Unfortunately, the goodwill of our collective rhetoric does not match our moral budget, and does not match where we put our dollars, because our dollars go into violence. And I use that term broadly, but I mean violence and violence protectors, violent actors, all of the wide scope of violence. That's where our money goes. But the president, in his language of reform, it means really well. Ebony, you know as long as you've been covering this just as long as I, despite the fact that you look like you're fresh out of college, that we know good and well, folks have been echoing the language of reform, training, and safety, and non-bias for decades now.
Good and damn well.
And again, we just get the front row seats now that we have body cameras, now that we have some of this other technology, to our own unfortunate demise.
In a reaction, Judith Brown Diana, she's the executive director of the Advancement Project. She put out a statement and said that tonight's State of the Union, held just weeks after the killing of Tyre Nichols, did little to address the core problems, like you were talking about, inherent to policing, while it acknowledged, which we see so much, the pain and grief of families like the parents of Tyre Nichols. His administration efforts to put more money and resources into policing will only result in more murders of Black people at the hands of police. And then today I heard an interview with Attorney Crump and Rovon Wells, and she said, if they don't get this George Floyd Justice and Policing Act bill passed, they are showing me that they have no humanity. The president, go ahead.
That coming from his mother is valuable, and I want all of your audience to really sit with that. Additionally, let us consider the writings of Derricka Purnell. She is someone like Judith Brown Dianis who works in that space and is a thinker and a writer and a lawyer who's been on the ground working around the question of abolition and what a new society would look like. And she leads us to conclude that the George Floyd Policing Act would not have even saved George Floyd's life.
That was a question that came out from Republicans that said that this bill would not have done that. There was a lot of backlash from it because it is a bill that is absolutely needed. But go ahead with your commentary on that, because that's one thing that people have been debating. What is the shift? What is the job that needs to get done?
Absolutely. That's one of the job that needs to get done, quite honestly, is us to rethink, reimagine, and then recreate what police are supposed to be.
Who's the we, though? We say that.
It's the same we that has to make up we the people, but not the whole project of Western democracy is partially premised on three ideas: liberty, equality, and sovereign nationhood. The challenge about sovereign nationhood, though, when we unpack all those fancy words, is who is the we, that's us, and who is the we, that's them. And in the United States, unfortunately, the different amalgamations of Euro ethnics when they came over, of enslaved Africans, of our sisters and brothers and others from the South America that are making the migratory trip, there has never been a consensus that we are all the same we. And so long as there's a distinction among who is we, then some people may just have this coming. The last thing I'd want to point out about police reform is that I find it appalling to point out that police reform and language around police brutality is often looked at as the Black issue, when time and again, white folks get killed by police while they are unarmed. White folks are being killed by police when they are playing with toy guns. White folks are being killed by police when they are having mental episodes. And yet it's Black folks that are there to speak up for those white victims.
But
and
have we not seen that in so many of our movies?
And it tells me that the broader white community, I know you have a lot of white audience members, and I do not want them individually to feel attacked, but I want them to understand the behavior.
But we speak truth. We are Black owned and operated. We speak.
I understand that. Well, that's fine. And I want them to understand that when we say this language, even our Black audience, we want them to understand the difference between whiteness as a construct, yes, white people as a collective, and white human beings. And so white people as a collective are communicating that they are quite okay with police committing this type of violence on other white people. And the reason that Black people speak up is because Black folks have a particular interest that if it can happen to a Black person, it can happen to me. White Americans don't tend to share that same conclusion.
That was powerful. When you talk about, and I'm going to kind of end with this, in response to the President's State of the Union address, we saw Sarah Huckabee come with this grim reaper look. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, whoa, okay. And one thing she said that just kind of made my blood curdle is the America that we love is changing. And it just kept ringing in my mind because this is part of the crux of the problem, the backlash that we have always seen since Reconstruction. And we define this America, and they've been singing this America. But what do you mean when you say we know the America that who is the we that we love? What is it about that you love? And what is it that you don't like that is changing? And so it's almost like they make these statements, but you really got to deconstruct what it means and how do we go forward, because the president is facing a very divided Congress and the Republicans control the House. Now, of course, Senate's going to block them and the president's going to block them also on what they need to do. But I think we need to pay close attention to the language that is coming from both sides, actually. If you say you love me, why don't you? Right? Because let's break that. Why, if you really care about my communities, where's the funding? Like you said before, you show me where you put your money, then I'll show you where your morals are.
Go ahead, Ebony. Go ahead. Let me go ahead and turn around and might as well ask you some questions. I'd love for your expert opinion on some of these. I think that to what Ms. Huckabee Sanders said, it's valuable to think about one of America's most sacred holidays, the Super Bowl. When we hear quarterback Jalen Hurts and talk about we were going to go out and win and we want to go out and execute, he's not talking about Patrick Mahomes and his ability to complete a pass.
Come on.
And although he uses the word we, he being Hurts in this example, it's very clear none of the Kansas City Chiefs believes that Jalen Hurts is talking about them. Similarly, when Governor Huckabee Sanders says we are losing our America, she ain't talking to you and I, Evan.
No.
She's talking to the folks who believe in the values of John Brown and his raid on Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. She ain't talking to former President Barack Obama. She ain't talking to Vice President Kamala Harris. She ain't talking to those folks who think of America, even our dear sister Nicole Hannah-Jones, who is trying her best to assert Black Americans into the American project. And there are some even on the Black left who would be critical of why we want to assert ourselves there. But even when there are folks who try to assert their claim to the American project, Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders ain't talking to them. Who and what she's talking to is this pan-European project that the United States has ultimately become. Who she's talking to is this pan-European idea that the founders of the United States sought. One of the reasons that there was no particular distinction among the British or the Dutch, the distinctions among the Spanish or the French, the distinction among the German migrants, the reason that we could use the language of give me your poor, your tired, your huddled masses, because we ain't talking about them folks from Gabon. We ain't talking about them folks from Colombia or Peru. We ain't talking about them folks from Senegal or Cote d'Ivoire. We talking about
definitely ain't talking to those from Haiti.
And even when the Southern European and Eastern European folks come, then we begin to see how, as the writer Karen Brodkin Sachs calls it in her book talking about Jewish folks, how Jews became white. Broadly, we see how Euro ethnics stopped being Euro ethnics and became Americans. And so when she says the we, she's saying you are more than welcome to be an American if and only if your agreement of being an American comes on these terms laid out largely by the WASP nature of the founding of the United States. And so Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders, all she's doing is trying to do her best to do her Michael Irvin impression. When Michael Irvin on the desk of the NFL Network pounded on the table and said, "We're losing recipes." And what she's trying to communicate is that this project of Western civilization, Western Euro emphasis of ideology are losing our way. And quite honestly, Governor Huckabee Sanders, you are. But we would make the case, all of us, every single one of us who reject the singularity and the monolithic way of looking at life through the lens of Western Euro hegemony, all of us would say that is a good thing. The rest of us call it progress. The rest of us call it evolution. Multiculturalism makes us better. Come on now, I'm a Black boy from Baltimore. And when I see Black folk from Boston, Massachusetts, Denver, Colorado, or Mobile, Alabama, doing the salsa and bachata because they met with one of their coworkers who took them to the dance spot, oh, my heart swells with joy. When I see those folks come up from the West Indies with their soca and their musical vibrations, and I don't even know this dance, but my foot pats to it right on beat. Oh, that makes me more better and more whole. So I invite Governor Sanders Huckabee and others, when they say they are losing, what are you scared of losing?
Well, you know what? I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to call you the professor.
I am just echoing what those who have taught me have taught me. That's all.
Which is important, that we must learn and we must educate ourselves and seek other sources of information. Thank you so much, Professor Baker. Ray Baker, you've got to come back on the show. Where can people find you? People want to know what you're teaching, where you're at. How can they connect with you?
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and be a little funny. And Ebony, you picked on me last time for the ways that I craft my name.
Oh my
But
God.
you can find me on Twitter at RAYB. It sounds pretty simple, the letters RAYB. However, it's spelled out phonetically. AREAYWHYBEE. RAYB.
I'm going to have my editors like put that up on the screen.
You know what? Here's what all your audience should do. Y'all probably already following Ebony. Just keep following Ebony. I'm gonna retweet her all the time. Just go look at who be retweeting her.
Okay.
It be me.
It me. I love it. I love it. Thank you again for coming on. You are always welcome at AURN.
Thank you kindly.